Okay, I think I'm live now. Please let me know if you guys can hear me in the chat room. Testing 1, 2, 3. I think I'm live. So I'm sorry that it took me a few minutes to get in here. At the beginning, Dakota wanted to go out, and I didn't want her interrupting later on while I actually had the show and everything, and I did deal with that. So she's back in, and everything should be good for now. It's actually a nice day. Previously, we had some negative 20s to negative 30 wind chill degrees outside, and so she's kind of been cooped up in the house, and now that it's in the 20s, she wants to be outside, of course. So anyway, she's in relaxing now. And yeah, so I just wanted to talk about this. I've got a few links up on my browser tab, but it's not very organized. So I will probably be a little scattered as far as that goes. Okay. Let's see. Thank you for letting me know you could hear me, Avalon and Mendel Sky. I just realized that when someone pointed out dull term babies sell for me, and my mind just said, this is human factory farming. Yes, the abortion industry is sort of a human factory farming because people are out there just bringing the babies to term, and then they kill them as soon as they're practically full term, and then they sell the parts. And because the larger the part, the more useful it is for science. So I kind of want to talk about this sort of stuff from a law of attraction perspective, and I've discussed this in the past, and I listened to Abraham Hicks. I've got other videos on that if you've never heard of her, and so you can see my videos on that. But basically, you know, Abraham says that there's a war against poverty, there's a war against crime, there's a war against drugs, there's a war against terror, and what has it done for us? Nothing. The reason it just sort of makes whatever the war is against worse is because as soon as you focus on something, it expands. You'll see more and more of it. Wherever our attention goes is what just expands in our life. If we pay attention to something we hate, we'll see more of that thing that we hate. If we pay attention to something we love, we will see more of that something that we love. That is the law of attraction. As people focus on something they hate, terror, guns, you know, abortions. As soon as you focus on something that you hate, you will see more and more and more of it. As the people out there, like this Abolish Abortion group, and if you were a long-time listener to me, then you know about the bad self-eater fiasco. If you don't, there was this thing that got put out there, bad self-eater, and there was like this clock that was ticking down. And it had all these New World Order images and everything. And so people were looking at it and they're like, what the heck is this clock ticking down to? Why are they showing all these New World Order images and all that stuff? And so we were looking at it. I was looking at it on my channel. Other people were looking at it in the quote-unquote truther community, trying to find the truth. And it ticked down. And finally, it came up with a video on the screen as it was ticking down, and the video was showing an abortion. You know, the nitty-gritty of it, the disgustingness of killing a live being. And the way they did it, I was just explaining, this is not the way to get people to follow what you believe in. I am against abortion at this point in time of my life. I used to be, and then I wasn't, and then I am. And, you know, listening to the media can control your mind, and I know it can. And that's what happens. So I'm not against people who believe in it, and I'm not against those who have gone through it. I mean, in my own way of thinking, I think that when I took the birth control pill for how many years, that was basically, you know, sort of part of abortion in my own perspective, and I'm not going to do that again. But that's my perspective. But if somebody says, you know, like, hey, you are against, you know, if you're against abortion, you're against the people who did it, that's not entirely is not the case at all. I am not against anybody. And I know that even with this video, some people might be upset in the Jewish community about the comparison of Holocaust camps and animals, the factory farming. And the thing is, there are Jews for it and Jews against it. And I'm coming from a Hebrew perspective on my beliefs on things at this point in time. And I have some links in the description box for more on that. But basically, the bad self-eater thing got scrambled into federal beast. And, you know, it was this whole thing that they tried to really get people to say, why are you paying so much attention to the truth or community issues and not paying attention to the fact that people are slaughtering babies? And they just sort of slammed the truth or community like that. And I said, this is not the way to get people to, you know, agree with you. And it was so up in your face. And this is the abolish abortion. And I know that I see people on my Facebook and they share these abolish abortion pictures. And I get it. It should be abolished. It shouldn't just be, you know, accepted or, you know, legalized for part term. And, you know, it shouldn't just be like cut into pieces. People should just not be killing each other. But I understand why people do it because of the way their perspective, their thoughts, you know, people have been brainwashed to think that a baby is not a baby until it's born, or a baby is not a baby unless the mother says that they want the child. So if there's a mother out there who's pregnant and she gets killed, then some people would say that it's double homicide to kill a pregnant woman who is just about to give birth. But it's not double homicide to the woman who wants to go have an abortion, because that woman doesn't want the baby. So it's, you know, the baby is considered a human if the mother wants it, and the baby is considered not human if the mother doesn't want it. And, you know, then some people will call it a parasite of the body. And of course, you know, it's so, there's so back and forth on these issues between the different groups. And I'm not against anybody on either side, but I don't think we should be killing in any respect. And it's not logical to say a baby is a human only if the mother thinks it is. I mean, that's just kind of, but I guess that's exactly what people say with the gender ideas, you know. Somebody is either male or female unless the person thinks they aren't, you know. All of a sudden, it is what you think it is, you know. But we live in a society or a world that is built on the law of attraction, and when somebody believes one way, let's pick an example. If I believe it's easy to get a cab, every single time I go outside into the world, I'll notice incidences in where I get a cab very easily. Because that's my perspective. If I feel like I'm a lucky person and I'm always catching cabs, or I'm always finding money in weird places, and I'm always, you know, getting offered jobs, and if I have this perspective of my life, when I go out into the world, that is what I will see. If I feel like I'm an unlucky person, I never catch a cab, I am always losing money, and I go out into the world, that's what I will see. We see the world as we believe it is in our minds. If you feel like you're unlucky and you feel like you're always losing money, then you might not be the person, if there's money on the ground, to see it. Your mind will actually block out. You'll have like spiritual blinders, and you won't see, hey, you could have just picked up that $10 bill that was in the bush, because you don't have a perspective that you're lucky. Because you don't have a perspective that you can get money easily. You have a perspective that it's hard to make money, and you might lose some money. Maybe it was your dollar bill. Maybe you lost it. It went into the bush, and you could have seen it on your second walk by, but you didn't, because you have a perspective that I'm unlucky. I lose money. So the world shows to us what we believe. For those who believe that they should be able to be any gender they want to, they will see the world in which that is the way that it should be, rather than understanding that our DNA actually is just either is male or female. No matter if you change your gender, it doesn't matter, because your DNA is the way it is. You can't change your DNA in every single cell of your body. So that's not going to change, you know. But that's not what you see. That's not your perspective. And so I have nothing against somebody who's in that category, because they can't see beyond their perspective. And the same thing goes for other people in other situations. In a situation where you feel like, you know, you have to be able to have abortion because there are people out there who could die if they don't have an abortion, then you'll see incidences in which people would have died if they did not have an abortion, and it will fuel your belief because you're only seeing what you believe. Some people call this the rose-colored glasses or something, that however you see the world, you're always going to see the world. It's, you're looking through these different glasses, but they forget that people on the other side might have blue-colored glasses. And so they see everything in a tint of blue. And they don't know that. I was talking about this before. There's somebody out there who had this experiment where they put these glasses on that switched. It changed the way people saw the world. It flipped everything upside down. After a certain amount of time wearing these glasses, then they could see the world right side up because their brains started switching what they were seeing. So when they took the glasses off after the experiment was over, the regular world with no glasses was upside down to them. And it took them a couple of days to be able to, it might have been a week or something. And so it took them a while to get back to seeing the world as normal because their brain had been conditioned to flip what it was seeing. That's how it is for everybody. No matter what you believe, your brain is conditioned to see things the way that you think they are. But if you start to believe a different way, then the world will start to reflect that different perspective. And that's what I've been doing with my sort of feeling of poverty, like I can't make money doing something I love, etc. I'm switching it. I can have the mind of a millionaire, etc. I did my affirmations, my little meditation, my subliminal messages, and now everything's going great for me. And I know I'm not really talking about the topic on this title, but I'm going to get to it, and this is what I want to say. There's some people who would look at this idea and they would see from a victim mindset. So there was an article on here, Dear Vegans, Stop Comparing Animal Slaughter to the Holocaust. And they sort of have this victim mindset that you can't talk about this stuff because you're kind of just, they constantly see it in a way that, sorry, I'm moving this thing on the screen and I didn't want to do that. They see it from their own perspective, but they can't see it from a different perspective. And in here, this person is upset. And so I don't mean to upset people if they come onto my channel and look at this, but I want to discuss what upset them so much about the vegans saying that factory farming is basically like the Holocaust. And there's people on both sides. And so I just want to share the different perspectives on both sides. And I'm just going to look, and this is the time that I was saying I wish I had it a little bit more prepared before time. But I guess you can watch the screen, and I'll also put the links to these in the chat room, actually. If you want to check it out, I can do that now. But also I'll put it in the description box below in case you're interested. All right, so of course there's things here like this tweet. Listen to the screams of a free-range chicken boiled alive to rid them of their feathers while in factory farms. They do this to billions each year, and many are not able to walk from birth defects and weak bodies bred to be killed in weeks. And then, of course, Twitter blocks it. And Facebook does the same thing, and they do the same thing about abortion videos also. They'll just block the stuff that people don't want to see. But we're paying. If you buy this stuff, you're paying for the stuff that people are just kind of given a blind eye to. All right, so the article here states, the problem is, as a descendant of Holocaust survivors, I'm more concerned with putting myself in the shoes, or lack thereof, of the victims of Hitler's regime. Most of the people who were herded through Auschwitz gates and into gas chambers, much like in this barbaric imagery, aren't able to tell these misguided herbivores to take a hike, so I will. Dear vegans shouting animal holocaust, you are not empowering animals. In fact, you're falling prey to Hitler ideology. I found that very interesting, that they're comparing the vegans to Hitler. So she's saying that you're falling prey to Hitler ideology, that Jewish people are subhuman. That's not at all what vegans are doing when they're promoting this. They are saying that we should be treating animals the same way we treat humans. And where did this whole idea come from? Well, for one thing, this person must obviously have this perspective that animals are subhuman. And so I have a link in the description box about how in the Bible it talks about us having the same spirit as animals do. So I put that verse in there. I'm just going to look at it for a second and read it off if I can here. All right. And I have a couple more links about veganism and going back to the Garden of Eden, which is the way that God actually created us. The word nephesh in the Bible, that is soul, translated as soul. The first 4 times nephesh is used in the Bible is used exclusively to describe animals. Animals are souls. And Ecclesiastes says we're no greater than beasts or animals, and we have the same spirit inside. Ecclesiastes 3:17. I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. I said in mine heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them or show them, that they might see that they themselves are beasts. So God just said humankind are beasts, just like animals. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts, and every one befalleth them. As the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yeah, they all have one spirit, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast. For all is vanity. All go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. So we are all nephesh, or souls, and have the same spirit from God that goes back to him when we die. From a Jewish perspective, we are all equal, animals and humans. We were never meant to eat animals originally. God created the animals, and Adam named them, and they were all partners. They were all supposed to be, playmates. And God created the animals to help mankind, but not in a bad way, but in the same way that Eve is a helpmate of Adam. We are all partners. We're all supposed to be co-creating things together. We're all supposed to be in this together. And to say that that means that people like vegans are just like Hitler saying that humans are subhuman, that doesn't make any sense. We're all created equal. And actually, I've seen some Jewish people who they look down on the Gentiles because they say the Gentiles are not like man. They're like animals in a negative connotation. And that's not ever what God was all about. Now, yes, people do use animals for symbolically representing mankind, and I've discussed the whole we're not supposed to act like beasts. We're not supposed to go on just animalistic behaviors, but that doesn't mean animals are less than us. We're all spirits. We just all have a different perspective of the world. And we shouldn't be using each other. We're supposed to take care of one another just as if we were taking care of Christ or ourselves. Treat others as you would want to be treated. So to say that that's like Hitler, it's just the vegan idea that this is like an animal holocaust has nothing to do with saying that some people are subhuman. It just is saying that animals and humans are all from the same spirit, from the same creator God. And we should treat each other as we would want to be treated. And that is basically the opposite of what the Nazi regime did. They did not treat others as they would want to be treated. But where did this come from? And I found myself thinking about this past week, and I hesitated doing a video on it because what you focus on is what you attract into your life. But it's why I'm focusing on not judging one side or the other, because it's really in our judgment and saying this is bad that we get more of it. Just kind of explaining for people to understand this idea. And so I was wondering, what came first? Did the factory farming come first, or did the concentration camps come first? And so that's why I wrote in the chat room, the concentration camps and extermination camps were in the 1940s. That's when World War II was going on. And so I kind of wanted to discuss when this factory farming came into existence. And the reason is because I was thinking one thing led to another. And factory farming, it came about earlier than the concentration camps, but it didn't actually hit its exponential growth, let's say, until afterwards. These things were going on at the same time period, if you say maybe 50 years. And that sort of lifespan of somebody we saw this explosion of mistreating people and animals. And so I was thinking, I think that they're connected. But how? How did it all get put together? So this one is not yet here. I guess I'll talk about it because it's just on my screen right now. But this is the bacon and eggs idea. So just trying to get together a little time frame of all this stuff. Now, bacon and eggs was not a staple. People didn't used to eat it. So it says here, believe it or not, though bacon's association with the American breakfast is barely a century old. Before this, the majority of Americans ate more modest, often meatless breakfasts that would include fruit, a grain porridge, oat, wheat, or cornmeals, or a roll, and usually a cup of coffee. So how did bacon become associated with American breakfast? And it says, let me introduce you to the granddaddy of public relations and advertising, Mr. Edward Bernays. The Austrian-born Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud and was quite good at using psychology to get people to buy a product or an idea. He was the guy who was hired by the Aluminum Company of America to use the American Dental Association to convince people that water fluoridation was safe and healthy to the public. His campaign for Dixie cups scared people into thinking the glasses they were drinking out of were unsanitary and could be replaced by disposable cups. That's a big waste right there. Bernays was hired by President Coolidge to help run his re-election campaign in 1924 and encouraged Coolidge to invite the country's leading vaudevillians to the White House for a meet and greet over pancakes. This was one of the first known political pancake breakfasts that are now so popular among presidents and council members alike. In the 1920s, Bernays was approached by the Beech Nut Packaging Company, producers of everything from pork products to the nostalgic Beech Nut bubblegum. Beech Nut wanted to increase consumer demand for bacon. Bernays turned to his agency's internal doctor and asked him whether a heavier breakfast might be more beneficial for the American public. Knowing which way his bread was buttered, the doctor confirmed Bernays' suspicion and wrote to 5,000 of his doctor friends asking them to confirm it as well. This study, in quotes, of doctors encouraging the American public to eat a heavier breakfast, namely bacon and eggs, was published in major newspapers and magazines of the time to great success. Beech Nut's profits rose sharply thanks to Bernays and his team of medical professionals. So I'll leave a link below to that, but that was in the 1920s. So again, this is all the same time period. People were just eating regular meals, probably vegetarian most of the time, maybe some eggs just because they had a hen or something out back, but you know, it's not really, it wasn't very popular until the 20s, let's say, to have meat for breakfast. And of course, it was done for profits. All right, so I'm looking around to see, yeah, factory farming had its beginning in the 1920s. Okay, so it's only in the beginning of the 1920s when the factory farming actually came into existence for the most part here. It says factory farming had its beginning in the 1920s after it was discovered that vitamins, particularly vitamins A and D, could be added to animal feed. The addition of these vitamins to feed meant that animals no longer required exposure to sunlight or exercise outdoors in order to grow. Unfortunately, this meant that many of them became subject to indoor living year-round. So, 1920s, factory farming, because the animals can now go indoors. Hello, Jessica. And because of these vitamins that they're giving. And so factory farming is just beginning in the 1920s. And then we have the bacon and eggs thing because they wanted to have more money. So they pushed bacon and eggs with propaganda into the world, saying that it would be really good to have some meat for breakfast, basically. That was the doctor's idea, right? For money. And so that's what's going on in the 1920s. It's just beginning at that point in time. Okay, so I wanted to find out when it really started going. So then the 1940s happened with the whole World War II. Well, let's say about that. So what happened is a lot of people are now getting greedy. And I've discussed this in previous videos or posts on my channel, on my Facebook page, etc., about how basically when you... Okay, so the god of money is Mammon. I've discussed this also in the article on veganism and going back to the Garden of Eden. The link is in the description box below. So we're kind of worshiping the god of Mammon when we are, let's say, paying for these factory farms who, in turn, reject the well-being and safety of animals for more money. So they will skimp on feed. Like there was that one time we found out that they were feeding cattle Skittles because it was cheaper. So there was a truck that was going down the highway and it overflew it, and there was all these Skittles on the road, and they found out it was going to cattle feed. So they were feeding the cattle's junk because it's cheaper. And of course, they do awful things to these animals, which I'm not about to go and just show everything to you. I mean, you can go find that stuff yourself. But they torture these animals. They boil them alive, etc. And thunk their heads into the wall and, you know, clip off their testicles and their tails and things like that with no anesthesia, etc. I mean, of course, the little chicks, the guy chicks that they don't need anymore, they just blend them up because they think that's the most humane way to deal with it. But anyway, they're doing all this stuff because they don't care about the well-being, and it's more expensive to try to get rid of the baby chicks that are born that are male. It's more expensive to, you know, feed them, so they just want to kill them first thing and blend them up. So they are not caring for the animal's well-being at all. So by what they're doing to the animals, they are worshiping the god of Mammon. So this meat is actually meat sacrificed to the god of Mammon, money. They just are... they're killing these animals for money, you know, like all those little baby chicks that can't be born. They don't want to pay for them to have feed or whatever. They just end up, you know, hatching little male chicks and blending them up. So they do this because they want money, and they're killing these animals, sacrificing them to the god of Mammon, right? The god of money. So that's an idol, and that is meat sacrificed to idols. And I don't know exactly when all this started, but the whole idea of factory farming, not letting animals breathe the fresh air of creation and taking them in, started in the 1920s. So they're already going to go for more money by taking these animals into the farm, you know, buildings, and they're concentrating these animals into these buildings. So that's the 1920s. And what you focus on starts to grow. And as they were focusing on, well, how can we save money and, you know, not care about the well-being of the animals, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, obviously. But, and kind of exponentially, really. But as it was going and getting worse and worse and worse, then there's this spirit of, we don't care about animals. We don't care about your well-being because we want money. And that's when people started to eat them more often, right? Because of the bacon and eggs and all that stuff. We don't care if these animals, you know, we don't care where they're coming from. We just want to eat it. And a lot of it is propaganda, but there's people out there that are pushing this propaganda. And so there's a lot of people who are focusing on using psychology to trick people into doing things that they don't want to do with this propaganda, right? And along comes Hitler and the Nazi regime, and they start to do the exact same thing by saying, well, the Jews, and I think they also were doing it to homosexuals at the time and stuff like that. Whoever they didn't really agree with, they could just, you know, put into these concentration camps. And so they did that. But what I'm saying is that there's this spirit that people had been feeding of, we don't care what happens to this person. And Hitler was, and the Nazi regime was like a product of what we were doing to the animals, probably. This is law of attraction. The more we focus on, you know, the animals aren't worth anything, well, then just say this human is like an animal, and then you say they're not worth anything. It came from this whole perspective that animals aren't worth anything, that it doesn't matter, they're subhuman. And if we hadn't started saying the animals don't deserve to be outside in the air, you know, then these people who it's not all Hitler, okay? What I'm trying to say is the concentration camps and everything, it came out of something else. And now we see more and more people who are against, you know, Hitler and what he did to the Jews, etc. And it's just this huge thing against concentration camps. But we see the United States is doing the exact same thing. As soon as World War II is over, factory farming explodes here. It just explodes after, try to find the date, the year. Sorry. I wanted to have this like all set up beforehand, but trying to remember why I had this one on here. CAFOs. Sorry, I'm just reading through this real quick. I don't know if it was on here. Might have been a different page. Let's see here. Well, this is one thing about the time that changed. Every year, more than 9 billion chickens are raised and slaughtered in the United States, which accounts for roughly 95% of the land animals butchered for food each year. I mean, it's just awful. The factory approach to raising chickens, as the meat industry has grown, the large companies that monopolize it consistently find ways to shield customers from the reality of their meat. Though consumption of chicken meat has more than doubled per person since the 1970s, few people outside the industry have seen the inside of a chicken farm. While it's easy to imagine that most chickens spend their lives scratching around in lush pasture, the truth is quite different. To understand the way that 99% of chickens are raised in the United States, you need to look closer at the factory farm. Until the 1950s, and so the World War II concentration camps and everything, 1940s. So until the 1950s, raising chickens for meat was a costly process. So most people made do with the occasional chicken dinner as a Sunday treat. Eggs were the prized commodity, and chicken meat was considered a bonus byproduct of raising eggs. Most coops were small, housing about 60 birds, and these birds had constant access to the outdoors to nest, roost, dust, bathe, and enjoy other natural chicken behaviors. By the 1980s, the egg industry scaled up and began to shift from standard coops to massive complexes that often housed 500,000 birds per coop. While these measures increased productivity and made economic sense, they came at a cost to the birds' quality of life, with overcrowding, disease, and high death rates. So this is the time frame. It's getting bigger in the 70s and then huge in the 80s for the chickens. All of this stuff is just sort of growing exponentially since World War II, and everybody is condemning Hitler for what he did with the concentration camps, and yet we do the same thing with these animals. And the whole idea that you can do this came from the fact that people do believe that animals are somehow subhuman. So, Megan Mendelinskaya here, religions push it too, as in God says we can eat them, they're lesser beings. God didn't send Jesus to die for animals, blah, 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 etc. And there's this idea that animals are less than. And so that obviously was part of when they took these animals indoors into the factory farms, is they thought animals were less than humans. Until then, people were taking care of their animals in general, let's say, as a member of the family, and then once in a while they might eat it if they needed some meat, or, you know, the eggs that were just being hatched, or not being hatched, obviously, the eggs that were being laid, they would eat those things, but they aren't going to go and, like, get rid of all quality of life for their animals. That's not how people on these farms used to do things. They were, like, parts of the family. I mean, I understand that they eat them. I wouldn't eat parts of my family, but they took care of them in such a way that they didn't, you know, think lesser of them as much. Like, it's grown exponentially how much people think less of animals these days, which is probably what caused that one person to write that thing against veganism, because, you know, people today are kind of under the impression that animals are less than humans. But what I'm saying, that's not the original, you know, Hebrew perspective. And we're supposed to take care of our animals. There's another thing about, you know, animals in the ditch and taking care of them on a Sabbath, etc. You know, we're supposed to be taking care of animals. It's not, it was never the way that people push it these days. But obviously there was propaganda saying like, it's okay that we take these animals inside and they don't get as much fresh air. It's okay. And it's just every little bit turned into something bigger. And everybody just kind of said to themselves, well, it's okay about this, or, you know, it's not that bad and everything. And so we just, as a society, sort of said, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, until finally we were having concentration camps of animals where they were concentrated. I mean, that's literally what it was. And how can you condemn Hitler and Nazis for doing that when we did the same thing? Animals are still the same spirit of our Father. It's, you know, they have souls. You just look in their little eyes and you can see like they're struggling with pain. And I mean, there's people that have debated, do fish have feelings? You know, do they hurt in pain? And there's studies out there that say they do. Now, of course, there's people that say there's studies out there that say they don't. But that's what I'm saying. Whatever you believe is what you see in this world. And I believe everything was created from our Father, and everything is really a part of us. I mean, even if you just go with the whole quantum mechanics. Now, science would say everything came from the Big Bang, and so that's why we have the quantum entanglement, because we're all the same thing that just exploded into multiple particles, but we're still quantumly entangled. If you do one thing to something over here, it's happening to this one over there. And that's science. Now let's see it from a human perspective of the Bible. Everything started out as the primal atom, and you can see my article on the primal atom for more information. But then Eve was taken out of the primal atom, and so we had Adam and Eve. And you can say that's just how the electron, Eve is the electron, and an electron was taken out of the atom. However you want to see it, whatever. The body of Adam, the primal atom, split, and we're all just part of Adam. We all come from the same place. But of course, then somebody could say, well, the animals didn't come from Adam. But in reality, just everything. God created Adam first, and everything probably came from him in that perspective. So anyway, that's how I see it. I think we are all quantumly entangled. And that's why Jesus said, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. Because if you do it unto others, you are having it done unto yourself. That's why you reap what you sow. And if you are infusing these animals with stress hormones and, you know, whatever they're going to have when they're slaughtered, and then you eat them, you're ingesting that and you become them and they become you. And when that happens, well, then you become more stressed. You've ingested some stress hormones, you know, and so whatever you did unto them, you're doing unto yourself. It's just the way the world works. And that's why it's better to not be eating that stuff. And that's why people go through a meat detox when they stop eating it. Sometimes people go a little crazy, like angry or fearful. And they go through these things because their body's detoxing these emotions that they've had put into them. And I mean, I know people who have done this when they stopped eating meat. And some people, they just can't. They can't get out of that. They feel those feelings and then they go back to eating it because they don't understand why, you know, they think that they need it. And if you think that you need it, then you'll see a reality in which you need it. And if you think that you don't need it, then you'll see a reality in which you don't need it. So they're all a part of us and we're all a part of them. And we're supposed to be taking care of each other. But it wasn't until people said, well, us versus them, that they come into this idea that we can do whatever we want to these animals and put them in these coops where they don't see the light of day because they're them and they're not us, you know? And we created a society in which somebody could say, well, humans are less than human if this or that, you know? And it's happening all over the place. There's people out there who are saying, well, white people are less than black people. The Hebrew Israelites who believe that, you know, the white people are from Esau, and that's why they're red, and because Esau was red. And so they say white people are Esau because if you slap them in the face or whatever, they turn red, they blush. That's why they're Esau. And that means that they're less than human because, you know, they weren't the ones God loved. And, you know, the racism, if somebody is focused on racism and has a victim mentality, they will see this, you know, explode in their world, that they keep seeing racism everywhere they go. Except that they don't understand that the racism is within themselves, that they are the ones who are being racist against white people. And I've had to block somebody on Facebook before for saying stuff like that when I love everybody. But, you know, saying they can say some crazy things out there, you know. I'm not going to be involved in the racism that's out there. And, you know, people, they don't understand this world is like mirroring back to them what's going on in their lives. And if they are seeing racism everywhere, there's something going on in themselves that's focusing on racism. And if you're seeing the injustice of abortion and factory farming and all that stuff, then there's something going on in you that you're judging this stuff and thinking about it. And I don't really want to be judging this stuff anymore. And I wasn't really planning on doing a video on this because I thought to myself, well, if I talk about it, then doesn't that mean I'm just going to see more and more of this stuff in my life? And I don't really want to, but I'm hoping that because I'm not coming from a place where I'm being judgmental, where these people are evil for doing this stuff, it's just, it is what it is, you know. I understand that there's a time and season and a place for this stuff, and it's all beneficial in the sense that people are watching a mirror of themselves. And if you can look at something and hate it, it shows that you're judging something. And I guess it's just something to learn from. So it's just teaching us something. And if we can learn something from it, we can move forward. And I mean, I've seen interesting things about this whole like Hitler and all that stuff. I mean, there's people out there who think that the Holocaust didn't happen at all. Some people think it was way less than we're told it is. It's probably less than we're told it is, but I think that something happened. Not going to be delusional, like there's, you know, stuff out there about it, but how can we know anything happened for sure, right? Our history has been manipulated in so many ways, more ways than we can count. We've seen what propaganda can do to just a generation in this world. You know, I mean, when I was growing up, racism was going away. When I went to college, you know, there was way less. And sorry, I heard something. And then all of a sudden, Obama goes into office and people are focusing on racism, and then racism explodes exponentially again, almost in the opposite direction. So it's kind of really weird that it's just a generation, you know, 20 years, and we have a totally different reality in which we live. So we create our own reality. And as long as we're not judging others, then we would be less judging of ourselves. And that's why we're supposed to forgive others, because you can't be forgiven yourself unless you've forgiven others. And we're supposed to just be more live and let live, I believe. And that's really what I'm trying to do in my life. And somehow I want to be able to talk about issues like this so you guys can get a perspective, maybe that you won't hear elsewhere. But I'm going to check out the chat room in a second. But anyway, that's, I guess, my thoughts on this. Is we sort of created this this life in which it is like factory farms. There's one thing I did want to point out on this Reddit here about what are your thoughts of comparing factory farms to the Holocaust. And there's a lot of people who say don't do that. But there was an interesting couple of comments. One of them was from a Jew. See, there's one from a Jew who says the comparison is terrible. Somebody else thinks it's a horrible, horrible idea. All right. My family is Jewish. I am Jewish, but not religious. I have worked in Jewish organizations. Family of mine died in the Holocaust. While I would never, ever say it out loud, the animal industry is worse than the Holocaust, in my opinion. I don't say it because it's too radical to convert people, but that's simply how I feel. Of course, the response here is 6 million versus 50 billion a year. Hard to deny it, even if you don't value human lives as equal. So it's just, it's obvious that there are things to compare. Sorry, I was trying to look for another one here. I don't think it was that one. I'm not sure where it's going to be. But I would suggest maybe checking out the comments, because there are some interesting comments in there. So I know that it is back and forth on should you not, etc. Here, Holocaust actually means burning of animals, as in religious animal sacrifice. And of course, I've discussed on my channel why I don't believe God or Yahweh actually asked for animal sacrifice. So he never asked for holocausts, and yet people do it. So, yeah. This is here. I'm Jewish and have grandparents that survived the Holocaust. Shoah, I prefer. The reason I am vegan is the way I live my response every day to the question, why was the Holocaust bad? For me, the reasons why the Holocaust was bad are the same reasons why I'm a vegan. There is a long, convoluted series of principles related to logic, ethics, and epistemology that lie behind it, but the basic conclusion is one ought not to be cruel. And of course, that's what they were doing. The obvious parallels, brandishing, torture, highly concentrated dwellings, industrialized killing processes, etc., are not as important to me as the underlying philosophical similarities. In fact, there are more important ways that the two are not parallel, the most important of which, for me, revolve around the rationale of mass killing. The rationale for torture and slaughter of animals is human nourishment and pleasure, while the rationale for the torture and slaughter of Jews in the Holocaust was hatred, fear, and disgust. One can argue either way how relevant the rationale is in assessing the degree to which the two are equivalent. So it's interesting that the perspectives of why people were doing it are different, but it all comes down to the fact that people can see these others as less than. Whether they're animals or humans that they think as less than, even Jews who say that the Gentiles are less than us, you know, in some condescending way, that's all wrong. Whatever side you're on, it's wrong to say that somebody else is less than you. And the same goes for people who say, you know, when I say I believe in universal salvation and everybody's going to be saved, and they say even Hitler, and yeah, even Hitler, he came from our society. He was, you know, who knows? He had some issues, and he might have been, he might have had some torture himself, trauma-based mind control or something himself, because there's a weird instance where he actually was liking this Jewish girl who he would always take pictures with her, and it was his business associates or whatever, military associates, who would tell him, stop doing this, stop hanging out with this Jewish girl, you know. And like, why was he doing that if he hated all Jews? It's just weird, and we don't know what really went down with everything. But yeah, everybody has a reason why they're doing what they do, and we have to forgive others for everything if we want to be forgiven ourselves. And so I've gone through that, I've done that, and I have no judgment against people whatsoever. I believe that through the law of attraction, we're already being judged and already being purified, and of course you can see my article on the lake of fire for more information about that. So with the law of attraction and people, we reap what we sow. I don't care about saying somebody else is bad for this or somebody else is bad for that. They have a mirror reflecting right back at them what they're doing. And they're either going to be living happily ever after if they are okay with what they're doing, or they're going to be tortured by themselves if they're not. And I think Hitler was a tortured man. So, you know, people have their own issues, and I'm not going to be going against either side whatsoever. There's a reason why people who have a victim mentality, but it's not good for them, and they can be free. Because victim mentalities are just slavery to their own selves. And I've talked about that on my articles too, about how we can really be free and no longer be slaves to anybody or anything. So, all right, so I'm going to look at the chat room, and I'm going to put these links to articles that I've discussed or maybe even didn't get to in the description box below after I finish off this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I'm going to just look up to see if there were any comments or anything that I want to discuss, and you guys can ask me any questions or get my thoughts on anything Yeah, so like I said, some people do use God to say animals are lesser beings, but that's not very biblical, as I discussed when I said that verse there. And of course, God made us vegans. He didn't want us to be eating each other. He didn't want to have death. And that's what's happening in the millennium period. All that stuff's gone with. Katrina D, illusion, because they are harming innocent animals in horrid ways that are absolutely unnecessary. There's no reason to slam the animal's head against a wall or boil them alive. Yes. I've also discussed how there were some pigs being boiled alive. I put that on my Facebook page, and I was like, you know, the world thinks that, in general, Christianity, mainstream Christianity, thinks that the devil's going to, you know, burn people in a lake of fire, and they're going to feel torturous like Lazarus and the rich man. And that's not at all what's going on in that. That's a parable. It has nothing to do with real life at a literal sense. And the thing is, when you boil an animal alive, which they're doing to pigs, and I also mentioned chickens, then you're actually the devil to those animals, because what people think of the devil as burning people in the lake of fire, you know, at least when people... You know, when the devil burns people in a lake of fire, supposedly for eternity or whatever, at least the animals are, you know, going to die and not have to have it for eternity. But, I mean, this is just ridiculous that people have these perspectives that it's okay to burn somebody alive. It's just ridiculous. And God says that, you know, it didn't even come into his mind to burn babies for a short period of time. So that whole, you know, literal lake of fire makes no sense as far as what God, Yahweh, actually says in the Old Testament. All right, illusion is over. Said lots of TV advertising back in the day made it explode, the factory farming and eating of meat and all that. Those who eat meat do not deserve to be shielded from such things. No, it's just law of attraction. If you are a part of it, that's what you get back. Jessica, Colorado, said, I keep hearing about veganism is part of AN, but I don't know what AN means. If you are still there, you can say what that was. Illusion is over, said, moral of the story is system has robbed us of our skills to desire and grow our own food. Well, I don't think that's really the moral of the story, but, you know, we're not robbed, because if you want to learn to grow your own food, you can learn how to do it, and you can do that. You are actually free to do that. Whether or not they put laws on that, you'll find a place where you can. Everything is possible for us. I believe that with the law of attraction. Agenda 21, yeah, I know. The whole New World Order, I've actually said, was actually created, brought together, it says, by Yahweh in the Old Testament. He's bringing all the nations together to pour out his wrath. Now, I don't believe he has wrath, but the thing is, everybody's coming together in order to be kind of poured into the lake of fire, or whatever, however you want to see it, to get purified so that the evil will be taken out of them. And so everything will work out all right in the end. I'm looking forward to the millennium period that's coming soon, I believe. All right. Yeah, we need to discern stuff ourselves. The New World Order can't do anything, but it's under Yahweh anyway, I said. He's bringing the nations together so that, you know, everybody can feel what's going on in themselves like a mirror, and they can get rid of the evil inside of them. Once you get rid of the evil inside of you, your world will change and reflect back to you how peaceful you are, which is what's going on in my life right now. Let's see. Read this week that entangled particles have an immediate reaction when something happens to the particles they're entangled with. Yes, that is the quantum entanglement thing. We have immediate reactions. This is scientific stuff. When something happens to another person, we are affected. And I actually shared something on my Facebook page today, too, about that. And I'm just going to go to the website real quick because I'll be able to see it on mine better, faster. So I'm bringing up my website over there. But, yeah, I'm just going to click on an article. And so this is leavesoftheTreeHealing.com, lothealing.com. So that's where the lot comes from. Let's see here. So scrolling down, my Facebook page for Leaves of the Tree Healing will come up shortly here. But we have control over how our world reacts with us by what we do. There it is. All right. Hopefully there aren't a bunch of people talking to me on here. I just wanted to bring up the image. All right. So there's an article, which I'll get to also. I'll leave this link below. I thought it was very interesting. It's not letting me put the article link in. I'll put it in below. But anyway, it's talking about how we're all interacting with each other. And this is from Dr. Sorry, it scrolled too quickly. The article is from Dr. Wayne Dyer. Okay, so here are some fascinating figures from Dr. Hawkins' research for you to contemplate as you review the impact you can have on humanity simply by being on the higher rungs of the ladder. Okay. One individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of optimism and a willingness to be non-judgmental of others will counterbalance the negativity of 90,000 individuals who calibrate at the lower weakening levels. One individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of pure love and reverence for all of life will counterbalance the negativity of 750,000 individuals who calibrate at the lower weakening levels. One individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of illumination, bliss, and infinite peace will counterbalance the negativity of 10 million people who calibrate at the lower weakening levels. One individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of grace, pure spirit beyond the body in a world of complete oneness, will counterbalance the negativity of 70 million people who calibrate at the lower weakening levels. So some pretty interesting numbers there. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. Yeah. The Book of Mormon, I have an address. If you want to email me, you can. angelforthelost@gmail.com, and try to raise your consciousness best we can do. Yes, as long as we raise our consciousness and focus on fixing yourself, because that's the only person you can fix. When you fix yourself the inside, everything else is fixed on the outside. When you focus on the kingdom of heaven inside, everything else will be granted to you. So there's nothing to worry about. We just have to focus on ourselves. And, Agenda 21. Yeah, well, there's people out there who want to continue to eat meat, so they say veganism is a part of Agenda 21, as if that's evil, rather than realizing that we shouldn't be treating animals the way we're treating them. And I know I used to be against it. I actually have a video on my channel against eating meat for the wrong reasons. I mean, stopping eating meat, veganism for the wrong reasons. In which case, they might end up making like Soylent Green. There's actually Soylent out there. And there's also these cheeses made from human DNA, which I think is just weird. It's like cannibalism, in my opinion. I just make cheeses made from nuts and potatoes and carrots and stuff like that. Tartaria, now I've heard the name, but I'm trying to remember what it is. I feel like I've heard of it, but I don't know. I really haven't looked into it too much. Let's see here. All right, so are there any other questions or comments or thoughts or anything you guys want to continue to discuss? Or else I'll probably just end the live stream, I think. But basically, I just want to say we should be focusing on ourselves, not judging others. As soon as we can heal ourselves on the inside, the world will change. And that's the best way to change the world, is by being the change you want to see in the world. Okay. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a great week coming up. Have a great weekend too. Hopefully you guys can relax, and Shabbat Shalom. And I think that's about it. Have a great week.